thinking about League Start. This is what I would call a reasonable investment. Like, I would call this the stage. I like the build. I'm going to invest into it. It's not a wacky investment, but it's like, I like the build. I'm going to play it for a while. And I'm going to, I'm going to get some upgrades. Yeah, Ashes. No, Ivory Tower's not going to be particularly expensive. But yeah, Ashes is easily the most expensive item that I have. Ashes, Ivory, or Watcher's Eye, and Unnatural Instinct, right? Those are the expensive things. But they're not, like, insanely expensive, right? It's just, you know, I like the build. I'm gonna invest into it.
This is the key to a crucible that stretches the sanity of the mind.
Okay. All right, it is over. Officially over. It is over in a good way. Thank you guys right off the bat. This journey's been pretty wild, but I have some really, really good news today. And that is that I'm happy with the build. I am all the way so happy with the build. It's gotten to a place that is beautiful. And in fact, what I did is I made my dinner a big, big bowl of spaghetti. And I'm not letting myself eat it until I record this video. Just for you guys. I'm hungry, but we're going to get this out for you guys. And that's my little motivation right there. So what we did on stream today is we checked the build at higher investment. Not super high investment, but pretty good investment. And I just want to show you guys what this is. So as you just saw, pretty darn good Phoenix kill. And the mapping is pretty smooth. The one thing that we had left, right, after the video that you saw yesterday, is the question of whether the defenses are actually good enough at, at a league start investment or a little bit after a league start investment. The most important thing that I want to emphasize here is this build is for me. I'm making a build that I want to play, that I think is going to be really fun. It may have some quirks. It may be a little difficult, especially for absolute beginners to play it. If you're a total beginner and you're looking for a league starter, Bone Shatter, SRS, Ignite, Elementalist. I like my Frostblink Ignite, but you can play Detonate Dead, anything like that. Lightning Arrow is pretty comfortable too, but a little squishier. Builds like that, those are the S tier league starters. This is what I'm making for myself, and I'm really happy with it. It's a good time. So we're just going to keep this really short and sweet, and I want to talk about what we did today. So we're just going to go to the old path of building. So what we have here is the loadout of where you should be aiming for, at least where I'm going to be aiming for. What we ended up doing is we transitioned into crit. That's kind of where you end up scaling your damage. Early on, we are using Elemental Overload, which is, this is your go-to when you're scaling elemental damage early on. If you have crit in the past 8 seconds, you'll deal 40% more damage. It's just a 1.4x multiplier, but you don't get the value of increased damage from your crits. So no value on crit multi or anything like that. This is always what you do on League Start, basically. If you're using an elemental skill and you're a Witch or a Templar, this is your go-to node. You just rush this thing, and as long as you have enough critical strike chance that you can sustain it, then you're good to go. So we were LE Overload before. That's our League Start low budget setup, but we wanted to go into a little bit higher budget. What would this look like at, 20, 30 divines, maybe even 40 divines? Is this a build that we want to put some money into and it's worth playing past the first week of the league? Because especially this type of build, not being an S tier, full SSF league starter, the identifying characteristic of it that would make it compelling would be that it's worth putting money into, that it would outscale some of those league starters, where at 5 to 10 divines, Elementalist DD is probably, like unbeatable essentially, right? But at 20 or 30 divines, or maybe even a little bit more, hopefully a league starter like this would actually just feel better. And then maybe 50, 100 divines, if you want to go crazy, it would be so much better than Elementalist DD. You're leaving them in the dust and you're not even, not even looking back at them. And that's the idea for something like this for me, is we can transition into an endgame build that's really, really fun, even though we have some bumps and bruises, a little bit, some growing pains early on, the old puberty of the build. What we have here is investing a little bit more, and I just want to show that to you real quick. So, as you can see, there's some not cheap items in here. This is what you should shoot for, at least this is what I'm thinking that you should shoot for once you get a little bit more money, once you spend time with it for 1, 2, maybe even 3 weeks, and you've invested into something that, is pretty solid. The one thing that I'm not doing here is you'll notice that I'm not using this cluster jewel yet. I'm kind of torn on what the cluster jewel should be still, so we're leaving that off. But we're using a void battery. We're going to a crit setup. We're power charge stacking. We actually have 9 total power charges. So void battery is just best in slot for our damage. It gives us a ton of increased damage as well as more crit. And then the big thing actually for the swap here, we were originally looking at a Cloak of Defiance, a couple of videos ago. And unfortunately, like Cloak of Defiance is really nice in like the white and yellow map situation, which is kind of, for it being a T2 unique, kind of a little too early, right? If you get lucky and you get one, that's great. But I actually couldn't make it feel awesome on just a Cloak of Defiance in, rolled up T16 maps. So we actually want to directly go for the Ivory Tower. This is really best in slot for us. What this allows us to do is we're going full energy shield. You can see I have 7,000 energy shield, but I only have 4 unreserved life. So we're using Ivory Tower right here, which is a great body armor for really big ES, gives us some mana, gives us some ES recovery. And the most important line here, chaos damage is taken from mana before life. So we can reserve all of our life. Usually it bypasses your ES. So if you get hit by chaos damage, it'll bypass ES. If you have 1 life, you just die from 1 hit. However, with the Ivory Tower, it'll hit our mana first. And you can see we have 7,000 mana. So against chaos damage, we actually have a 14,000 raw life pool, which is really, really nice. If I had max chaos res, I would actually have a higher chaos max hit than my other max hits because we have such a large pool to go against it. So we're actually like pretty tanky if we had max chaos res against chaos damage, which is really cool. So with the Ivory Tower, we want to reserve our life. This encourages us to go for a Prism Guardian, which allows us to reserve against our life without using Arrogance support. This saves us a gem socket. It also gives us 30% reservation efficiency, so we don't have to go for the mastery. Normally, you would want to go for this mastery right here for the 20% increased life reservation of skills, but this is a minimum of 4 points invested, and these 3 points would do nothing because we're not reserving anything against our mana. So these would kind of be 3 dead points just to spend 1 additional point to get that life reservation mastery. Whereas with the Prism Guardian, we get 30% off the bat, we get +2 level of aura gems, we get 30 dex, and we even get a lot of all res. This is a corrupted version with Fizz taken as cold. This is an example of what you can go for. Prism Guardian prices do go down really quickly after the first couple days of a league. So once you get into like day 2 or so of the league, you can go for Prism Guardian and then you're just popping off. Then you can just drop your Arrogance support, reserve all of your life, and it's a very, very comfortable shield to go for. Other really nice thing is because we're power charge stacking, we want to go for a +1 max power charge Mind Spiral. And this helmet it's a free helmet. It's a 1 chaos helmet. Theoretically, if the build guide's popular, the price of this could be a little bit high. I bought this for 19 chaos today. It was basically free. It's nearly perfectly rolled. The demand for it currently is very low. The other thing that you can do is just buy a lot of these for 1 chaos. Maybe price goes up to 5 chaos and just try to make it yourself. It's not easy to hit, but it's a very, very common item. So +1 max power charge on a Mind Spiral will never get that expensive. Other thing that we're doing is we are going for an Ashes of the Stars. This is the most expensive item that I have right here. Of course, if you don't have an Ashes, you would go for keeping the foible actually. So let's grab the foible and just put this puppy in. This is, we're just going to get a perfectly rolled foible. This is what you're going to go for initially. We can go for Life and Mana Catalyst. And then for our Anoint right here, I am currently using Safeguard. Really, really nice Anoint right here. It gives us great defense. 8 all res. It's a very cheap Anoint. 8 all res. Recover energy shield when you block spell damage. We're really focusing on block for a defensive layer here. So more spell block and then recovering energy shield when you block spell damage. I really, really like this as an Anoint. For defense, you can go for an offensive one if you want to. So instead of Ashes, we can actually go for a foible right here. And it's not as good. Our damage will go down quite a bit, but it is a great, starter amulet. This is what you're going to aim for initially before Ashes comes out, before you farm it yourself or the price starts coming down on the Ashes a little bit. So you can start with this. You're still perfectly fine, perfectly strong. Ashes is a gigantic upgrade, primarily because it increases the cooldown recovery rate of Ball Lightning of Static. If you recall from the last video, we talked about the skill cooldown. This is our ball rate for our uptime of our balls. And you can see our cooldown currently is 0.83 seconds. It's actually better than that. I actually have 25% increased cooldown recovery rate. I'll talk about that in a second. This is actually our real damage right here. This is actually 0.73 right now. And this actually gets better with Ashes of Star. So this is our ball rate. Ideally, we get to 0.66, so we can have a full uptime of 3 balls. But with Ashes of Stars, we're at like 2.5 balls or 2.7 balls or something like that right now. Cooldown recovery rate is very, very important for uptime of balls and more damage. So, more balls, more damage, more good. So ideally ashes, but you want to start with a foible. Really, really good rings here. Fractured mana regen rate, and then I just crafted them up really, really quickly. Incredibly trivial crafts, not that hard to make. Just some res, some mana, something like that. These are very, very easy to craft. Very important later on will be to get a Shaper / Crusader and or Redeemer belt, because you want the cooldown recovery rate as well as the mana recovery rate on your suffixes on your belt. I got really lucky, actually. I think I hit this in just like 5 to 10 reroll chaoses. This is a ridiculous craft. But you can go for a much cheaper one, a much worse one a little bit later on. Whatever jewel, we're using a Taste of Hate for some fizz mitigation. See, Unnatural Instinct right here is goated. You want to get that ASAP. Healthy Mind right here is goated as well. Big thing that we're doing here, as soon as you get into power charge stacking, you want to get a Militant Faith that's been converted by Dominus. You get an Inner Conviction right here. You get more spell damage per power charge because I have 9 power charges. This gives me 27% more damage, which is huge. I'm using an Immutable Force to become effectively stun immune, which is really, really good. And then last up, the thing that I'm doing here is I'm using a Balance of Terror. I actually have 37 more crit multi too. Let's type that in. Type that in right there. That's more accurate on our damage. You can see we have pretty darn good damage numbers actually at higher investment, but I do find this build very comfortable. And you can see our defenses are pretty darn solid too. That is with Arcane Cloak up. But if we turn that off, we lose a lot of damage, but our defenses are still pretty good, right? Even with Arcane Cloak, we got nice, solid defenses, still doing 20 million DPS, even without the cloak on, which is pretty cool. We have Balance of Terror right here. So I have both Temporal Chains and Enfeeble slotted in. And what I do is I actually just manually cast them. I just have them sitting right here. I'll cast them. And then you get the bonuses as long as you've done that in the last 10 seconds. Now, this is not mandatory. I'm doing it myself. I don't mind pressing additional buttons. As you can see, I have 4 different curses. So when I go in the boss room, I cast these 2, and then I walk up to the boss. I cast these 2. I put down 3 ball lightnings, and then the boss is just dead. We have so much damage output that pretty much any regular map boss will just die like that. So I don't mind doing that. If you don't want to do that, you can drop the Balance of Terror, but it is really, really nice for some upgrade on the build. And let's see. Oh, the spaghetti is calling to me. That spaghetti's calling real hard right now. What else to talk about right here? Really good mana recovery, particularly by rolling our flask. We want to get a Foreboding Flask, which will recover a lot more mana, but it's only at the end of the flask effect. So after 5 seconds, you'll get it all right away. The really nice thing about this is you can spam it because it won't just use all the charges over and over again. You can just sit there and spam the button kind of inefficiently, and it won't use a charge as long as there's one already queued up. And that makes it a lot more comfortable. And actually, that's the base number. As you can see, my mana, because I have so much increased mana recovery rate, I actually get 3458 mana over 5 seconds. Really tiny number right there, but that's what it says. Whew, but yeah. Oh man, sorry, the spaghetti. I lose control of myself when the spaghetti's involved. This is kind of what I'm seeing as the reasonable endpoint of the build. What we would call this investment-wise, I don't know. I don't know how much an Ashes is going to cost. I don't know how much the price of Prism Guardian, Mind Spiral. You don't know what build guides are going to come out that can drive the prices around. But I think what I've proven over the past few days is that you can play this at very low gear effectively, get to red maps, farm up some currency, and then this is kind of your end goal, what you're going to shoot for. And I'll give you guys a POB below, don't worry. I think this is a really cool build that you can play and have fun with as long as you're willing to invest into it. Is it the best build in the world? No. But do I think it's really fun? And it'll let you do pretty much anything. I think at this point, with this much damage, I didn't try an Uber today, but I do think it is probably Uber viable, particularly with the amount of recovery that we have. It should be very, very comfortable to take some pretty good hits and still be, pretty comfortable here. So yeah. It is over. Thank you guys so much for joining me on this journey the past few days. I love making these videos for you guys. It's been really fun actually kind of having this schedule of just like these nightly videos, sharing with you guys what's going on and how excited I am for the next league. Yeah, tomorrow we'll just, I have a couple of topics I want to talk about, and I think we'll just keep this going. Definitely subscribe if you just want to hear my thoughts on things too. I have a lot of things that I just want to kind of talk about, like the ecosystem of what's going on in the PoE community, kind of stuff that people don't really talk about in videos. Yeah, I just want to share that with you guys. I think some really cool stuff that we can learn from as well. So I'm going to eat that spaghetti, then I'm going to edit the video, get this out to you guys, and yeah, have a great rest of your night, and I'll see y'all tomorrow. Goodbye.